thought it would be fun to show you guys how I created the stamped and colored desert roses using the Celebrate Beautiful You collection. So I took the little stamp from the collection that has the most negative space that I could color, and I used just a piece of ordinary white coated cardstock that I wiped with an anti-static pad because I'm going to be heat embossing. I'm using VersaFine ink. It's a smoky grey color, which is not completely black, but it's not a light grey, it's a nice dark grey, and I'm using clear embossing powder. So I'm always adding the ink to my stamp. You can see that the little stamp tends to want to stick to the ink. That's quite all right. And I'm just doing these one by one. You want to apply even pressure, but because I'm cutting out the flower, it doesn't really matter if I have a little boo-boo. I'm going to do these one by one because this VersaFine ink, although it is heat embossable, it does tend to dry fairly quickly. So then I'm going to do the next one, and I won't bore you guys. I will pause the video and then I will finish all 6 of them and come back to show you how I heat emboss these. Just to repeat, I'm sprinkling the powder over, and using the anti-static pad ensures that the embossing powder will only sit on the stamped image. Okay, I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I have now stamped 6 of these little desert roses. You can do however many you want to, and I've shaken off the excess of the powder and I'm placing it into my foil covered plastic container, and I'm going to be heat embossing that. But first I want to just pour back my excess powder so that it doesn't get blown all over the place. There we go. And then I'm just going to activate my twinklings. There we go. I'm going to be using twinkling H2Os for my technique. You guys can use whichever product you want to that makes you happy. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8 twinklings here, and I think they match the color palette quite well. You can use all-purpose inks, you can use other watercolors. Maybe I'll show you guys how to use ordinary watercolors. I just love these because they have a shimmer. Okay, so I'm giving them a good mist with water to activate them, and they need about 3 to 5 minutes for the color to just activate with the water, and then they will be able to give you the coverage that you want. Of course you can start applying the paint now, but it will be extremely light, so I do recommend that you leave it for a minimum of 3 minutes. So now I'm going to go over to my heat embossing, and I'm going to hold this up really close so that you can see the magic happen. I like to preheat my gun just a few seconds, and then I'm bringing it to my paper, and you can see how it starts melting really quickly. There we go. Once it's shiny, it's ready, and I move on to the next element. Okay, you can see how once it's heat embossed and the powder is melted, it actually is darker, and that is the perfect color that matches this collection for my little roses. Okie dokie, that gets really hot, so let's just move that around. And then you just need to let this cool down. I like to count to about 5, but you can just give it a good wave. It needs to be cool to the touch before we work with it. Okay, so I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've gathered lots of coloring materials here, but I'm firstly going to show you how I'm coloring with the twinklings. Now, because a twinkle is a watercolor paint, I want to use water. So I've got a watercolor brush and I've got some water over here, and I like to wet my brush first, and then I'm going to pick up some of the ink, and I just want to show you how easy it is to apply color once you've heat embossed. I'm literally doing that. So you can see that I'm not coloring this in perfectly, because I would like some of the ink to settle in various areas on my flower to give it some shadows. Okay, so there I've got the purple, and now I'm going to go pick up some of that gorgeous pink, and I'm just going to touch it in there. And once that dries, you'll have a stunning two-tone flower, and I will obviously come back once I've dried it, once it's been dried. So to add a little bit of a shadow, you can go in with some grey. I've picked up some of the Hunter Grey, and trust me, once this is dry, you'll see how beautiful it is. I just want to do a pretty teal one as well. There we go. So I'm picking up some of the teal, and you can see I'm really quite unceremoniously just dabbing color. The heat embossing resists the paint. Just clean your brush before you move on to the next color, and you want to have somewhere to dab it in. I forgot to get my little kitchen towel. You can see that I'm just adding the second color here and there randomly. And once again, I want to just get a little bit of a hint of grey in there. And then I set that aside to dry. Now, I'm going to show you guys how you can use exactly the same technique. Let me just quickly clean my little craft sheet, my baby one. It's an old one that got a cut that I literally just used to, that I cut smaller. You can of course lift some of the ink. If your puddles are too big, don't lift too much, otherwise you're lifting all your shine. I've got some silks here. I'm going to show you how to do this using the silks as well. Silks made by the same company as the Twinkling H2Os. It's a shimmer acrylic paint, and it's a fabulous product. So once again, I need to get a wet brush. I'm going to dip it into the ink. I always like to transfer it to my craft sheet. Add a little bit of water and just tap, tap, tap. Add the color to your heat embossed element. Because I'm going to be fussy cutting these, it doesn't matter that I'm literally going over the lines. Let's add a little bit. I love this color called Love Struck. Let's add a little bit of Love Struck here. Just a touch. Okay. And remember, as with adding inks to anything, you can only judge this once it is dry. We do not judge our projects when they are wet, because then we will just keep on making a mess and moving ink around. I quickly want to show you how to add color using a really cheap set of watercolor paints. Wet. Watercolor really implies that it has to be wet. So you wet your brush, you tap, 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 apply the color. Let's go for a little bit of a darker shade as well. Oh, that's nice and bright. And I promise you, once you're done, it will automatically have that fantastic shading. You know, because we're not trying to do it perfectly. It automatically adds light and dark contrast. I don't know which other color succulent we can make. Maybe a brown one with some hues of, I see there's some orange in the paper. How about just adding a tad of that, and maybe even a little bit of the bright orange. Oh, I think that's going to look lovely when it's dry. And lastly, I want to show you oil pastels. I know a lot of ladies do own the Primo ones, as well as some other brands. Same principle. You can just pick up some color. Oh, not quite effectively there. Just apply the color. Wet it with your brush, move it around. Remember, if you want the watercolor look, you have to add water. It's not going to do that by itself, you guys. You have to get it wet. So the effectiveness of this will all depend on the paper you use. If you're going to be faffing around with paper like that, if it's just a really cheap cardstock, you will not get a beautiful effect. The silks are nice, but they're not my favorite. I really do like the watercolors. You'll see also when they dry, they'll give you the best effect. And we're going to add some shimmer to those two using the Zig Clear Shimmer brush pen. Okie dokie, so there you have it. Some beautiful desert roses. And I'm going to fussy cut these. You can see the shimmer on this one and this one that I did with the twinklings. I think the cheap watercolors look also really nice. These paints, the silks, not too shabby either. And then of course the water soluble pastels. Once it's dry, can you guys see that once the ink is dry, it gives a totally different look. Okay, so once I cut out all my flowers, I chalk the edges just to finish them off and to give them some detail. You can see that that really just finishes off the flower. And then you can raise these using foam tape, or you can mold them using your stylus tool, and you can just add them to your project. I think it's a fabulous and easy way to create some flowers, some interesting looking flowers. And remember that adding shadows should be easy, and I don't think that there's an easier way to create realistic flowers than just dabbing the watercolors. Once they've got the foam tape, you'll see they will have really some dimension on the project. I'll show a close-up. It doesn't get any easier than that, you guys. And also remember, it's not supposed to be too perfect. You're supposed to be enjoying the process. It's supposed to just be fun, and you should get pleasure from creating all these pretty things. It should really make you happy. It should not stress you out. And there is no wrong in our fabulous hobby. It's all in your eyes. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder.